Hi, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude, where at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, and I'm here doing my weekly series talking to modern dads and getting a feel for the flavor of fatherhood today. And I'm excited to talk today with an expert on connection. David Homan is runs a global community of connectors, and I think he's going to have a lot to say not only about how we connect with other adults, but how we use some of these same skills to talk with our kids. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Paul. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I was really excited to see your bio and to get your pitch for coming on the show, because this is an area that I find is really important. I just went through a course actually about parenting, peaceful discipline, and the thing that struck me in that course was this idea of every time you interact with your kids, strive for connection rather than something else like discipline or a teaching moment or whatever. But the fact that that connection part is so important with your kids and developing that over time. And so I was really just fascinated with the idea that that's what you do for a living, and probably have some really strong feelings about what it is that is connection, because we often in your world, we often talk about networking and going out there and shaking a lot of hands and meeting a lot of people. But are those individual meetings really important? Are they real connections, or are they just another person to add to your LinkedIn, list?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone knows by now the person you add to your LinkedIn list is just a distant memory. The minute that you finish doing that request, I will stare people, eye to eye and say, like, Paul, like, would you like to connect about this? Is it okay if we follow up? And I ask, this world of day and age, I ask consent, but otherwise the conversation was a waste of time. It might have been a nice way to pass the time,
Right.
but if I went with a purpose and an intent, totally different. But like, let me just address real quick, right? The way you connect professionally, the way you connect to your children, the way you connected as a kid, for me, these are all interwoven together.
Right.
At my last New York event, I asked this question that was seemingly innocuous to these groups of strangers I put together. There was this sequence of questions, but the end one was, what that had haunted you as a child that still affects the way that you engage with people today.
Mm.
And I'm, professional connector. I run a global network. I've done 185 events for my own community, but I've run thousands. And I sat up in front of this room as an example of this after I'd put every one of those intimate groups, and I said, third grade, I had a pizza party with an all-you-can game at this arcade right after. And at 2:30, when the party started, no one showed.
Oh no.
And turns out my dad, God love him, had told everyone it starts at 3.
Oh.
So I sat there thinking, no one's going to come to my
Oh.
party. And
Oh.
now I have run hundreds of sold out events. I produce things at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center, just massive. And that same fear of me in third grade still exists in me, even though I am a best-selling author about connection. Every time the way I things challenged me as a kid affect me, and I carry that
Hmm.
into every conversation I have as an adult. So when
Yeah.
I talk with my kids about what I do, or I talk to them about, if they're thinking their friend's late, maybe their friend doesn't want to come over, as opposed to it's New York, the subway was delayed, it's a
Right.
Sunday. Those little things can really affect you for the rest of your life. Because what imprints isn't that positive of the reaffirmation they did show. It's what that constant nagging fear is in your inner narrative you have to change, or learn to mitigate as you mature?
Well, I think we've touched on something that maybe is really important here too, that I did want to get to is this idea of vulnerability, because I think 20, 30 years ago, when you go to a networking event, was all about me. I went to Harvard, I went to Yale, I've got my MBA, I've got a Nobel Peace Prize, whatever, whatever it is, and you put yourself forward that way, rather as the strongest individual you could possibly imagine, and therefore you thought somebody would, and maybe people would want to connect with you depending on if you had those criteria, those criteria they needed that connection or whatever. But the idea of how you use vulnerability that doesn't come off as weak and whiny, but establishes a human connection. Because I think we're all afraid of, TMI and saying too much, being too intimate, but there is some real strength in that vulnerability you talk about.
100%. What I'd say is there's a difference of thinking, right? Going back to this idea of consent and connection,
Hmm.
thinking that somebody wants to hear your whole story
Yeah.
as opposed to giving them that teaser to see if they respond back.
Uh-huh.
Because, I have parents
Oh.
as of 2 hours ago, my parents decided to cancel their trip to see their niece for her 1-year-old birthday, where she just started to walk. Because my dad's health is just not at a place where a travel from Florida to California is easy.
Hmm.
I would pause after sharing that. Now, that is a little bit of intimacy, but if somebody in a conversation, obviously not this that we have together, were to come back and to say, okay, then
And
you,
what I did
you
last week.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Or, like, oh, it's going to be hotter today. Whereas, like, what often happens is, and this will be talking about that Harvard graduate, that famous person, or just a person I meet
Right.
anywhere, almost everyone pauses and they did not expect to share that back. But by my courage of saying something like that, I think everyone I know on this planet I've talked to since I've been dealing with my dad's, again, he's 87 and healthy for 87 and super well spirited. But who doesn't have an aging parent that
Right.
they are sandwiched in between that and either taking care of their children or just dealing with the fact that by taking good care of their parents as if their parents are children, they that part of their life doesn't show up when they get into work or
Yeah.
they show up at an event. And for my world, that's the thing you're showing up with. If you lead with that, you build a connection from it, then you build a deeper bond. And the same is true with parents at my kids' schools. I
Hmm.
stopped having generic parent talk and I filtered out pretty quick who's going to bond with me. And my hope is that my kids like their kids and we continue the friendship.
Yeah.
And who am I going to be like, oh, I'll drop my kid off. I don't need to stay in your apartment for the next couple hours because you're going to talk about yourself. You're going to ask nothing about me. And unless you don't need to find me fascinating, but at least understand what's not fascinating about me by asking a question about my life. And the number of people who aren't curious, don't respond to empathy, and then wonder why they're lonely, wonder why they haven't met other dads in particular. Or, I'm often in the moms groups and I'm the one dad, then I bring in another, then they realize, oh, it's an approach to parenting that makes it that way, not whether it's a mom task or a dad task.
Yeah. But how do you navigate the giving too much information or showing too much of your common human insecurities, so that you're perceived as both empathetic and somewhat vulnerable, or striving for that connection, but not so insecure that somebody's like, frightened away.
So there's a really big difference to understand between sharing what is happening and sharing how you're reacting to it, how it's affecting you, and more than that, just giving somebody a sense that, you just need to unload on them. I think those are what we were mostly wary of.
Hmm.
So if you share something like that and the person is curious, you've built the bond already.
Hmm.
If you share something like I did and they don't know how to respond, which a lot of people don't, this is an art
Yeah.
that's often been lost, then you can ask a question of the other person that gives them the option to be vulnerable or not. So in the case of mine with an an ailing but healthy father, I might say something like, I don't know if it's something that you're facing with your parents or relatives, but I've found that, not just talking about it makes you better. I will say something like, I found that sharing that part of the journey with my kids makes me feel less isolated of dealing with it. And then my kids come up with amazing ways to help my parents feel stronger and happier because of it.
Yeah.
And, probably 15 times out of 10, when you talk about with parents in this case, something that you share with the vulnerability and how your kids reaffirmed it, either people love the idea or somebody that was more closed off will come back and say, my daughter made up a song for my father, her grandfather, to sing in the shower. So he remembers not to stay in for too long and get lightheaded. And then suddenly, like, you've broken that barrier of is it too
Right.
much to real understanding. And once we have that understanding, then the boundaries are much easier to go from consent and permission and what's too much to curiosity back and forth. Once
Yeah.
you're in that cycle, you've gotten past the hurdle of, is
Well,
anyone going to show up for my party? Is anyone going to talk to me when I'm waiting at, drop off or pickup? Or, why does that parent text me like 5 words when they know, I just went down to take care of my father in Florida?
right. I, I just wonder if there's some formula here in terms of finding things that are common insecurities versus like being at an event and saying, "Oh, nice to meet you. I just feel so insecure here because I really feel strange around people, and my career
So,
is
so,
going really
so
going in the toilet right now, and the mortgage payment is due, and I'm really hoping I'm going to get a job out of this thing. Like literally, we're like oversharing
but
and going
that,
into
Paul,
a
right?
spiral.
But that is a how you're feeling. That is
Yeah.
go talk to a therapist, go talk to a career coach. If
Right.
you walk to that same thing and say, I was feeling great about events, and then before I walked in this one, I kept thinking, like, do I really want to be here when I really want to achieve a better purpose than the work I currently have?
Hmm.
Or if you walk
Mm.
into that same thing, any variation about an action you want to take, something you're contemplating, not the feelings, the insecurity, that type of vulnerability needs permission. So, we do have to train ourselves in this. We can figure out our lines about what we say, how it comes across, how people read us.
Right.
Like I just went through what's called Climate Week in Unga in New York, for which there were hundreds of events, and I went to 17
Wow.
over 5 days,
For an
8
for an
or
introvert,
7
that's
a.m.
like that's nightmare
Yeah,
scenario.
until midnight most nights.
Right.
And when somebody's like, "Well, what's your favorite event? What are you enjoying?" And I don't answer the question. I come back either with a question to them or I say, the best parts of this were when I sit with somebody in quiet and solitude and I feel heard. And then we figure out that we were the ones that were supposed to meet amongst all the noise.
Hmm.
And that is a line, but it's also relevant for every conversation you have in an event because no one likes to swirl around a room of
Yeah.
people with drinks and bad air conditioning or overly heated and try to find the right person. Like they want to find that right person. So when you share that that's what you love, they think, hey, maybe they're the right person.
Well, yeah, you're touching on something that we were talking about a little bit before we got on about about this idea of creating some instant connection or some way to make it feel like I'm here with David, just the two of us now, and around the world, everything around us is different, but we have our own little world. And now I've just validated you and this moment by saying, you know, there's the cosmic chance that we were just in this room and we bumped into each other and we're having this potentially very important moment that changes my perspective on the event entirely, which is an amazing thing if you're able to somehow do that gracefully and the person for a moment feels really seen and special.
And what's amazing about this, and you said that so well, I honestly have nothing to add. Um, what's amazing is like when your kids do that, they walk up and they go, "Hey, want to be friends?"
Yeah.
Right? They go to somebody and like they're in or out of that just based on a gut feeling. And adults add so many layers to it.
Yeah.
But as the kids get older, then it's more about like, well, that kid took this action to help me or this action against me. They were rude to me. And it seems still black and white until we muddy it as adults the minute we start it. What
Yeah.
does that person think about me? Do they know anything about me? What did that comment mean? We're in that narrative. It's a false affirming narrative, which makes it hard. And that's why when you're sitting there, like in a parent situation, the people you might go up to will often be people where your kids know their kids, and that's your default. But you don't have to build a bond just with the people your kids are
Yes, yeah,
friends with. How many people, Paul, are you still in touch with from elementary school?
yeah, yeah.
And how many people were your parents in touch with from your friend
Yeah,
circles in elementary school?
yeah,
Right? Like
right.
you look for the few. We always look for the few. So as parents, what we try to do is to find people that are practical, right? My kid was sick this week. What homework did I miss? We try to find parents that are experiential, like, oh, I can't wait on that field trip to join it with you, because at least you know you have that energy and fun together.
Yeah.
And then you have once in a while that person where your kids brought you together and that bond lasts a lifetime. One of my best friends, Sunit, we have known him since his daughter was 3 months old and my daughter was born. He's on the board of my startup. I just got him a publisher for his book. He can ask me anything on this planet and I will help him. And if not for a Google post of extra large 3-month-old clothes his kid grew out of, I wouldn't have this dad friend that's redefined my entire life. And so your kids make that happen, but you have to be open for it. You can't be in that blinders mode of I
Mhm.
got to pick them up. Who should I talk to? What about this? Did I dropped the violin on the way home from fourth grade? Did it
Right.
break? Like my teenagers don't like we have all these cycles of it, and then
Well,
we tell narratives about how everyone else is acting or thinking,
yeah.
not realizing no one is as confident as parents they think they are. And no dad often is as little involved as people assume. And no mom is as overly involved as we assume. We just put stereotypes in
Yeah.
because when you're an active parent and you have the rest of life, you
Sure.
literally do not have enough time to deal with all of it. So it's a constant juggle.
Well, it sounds like you're saying that you're in that space, or even in a professional networking space, is trying to move away from the purely transactional, like, can you pick up my son tomorrow, or uh, I'll pass you my kid's lunch, and that type of thing, where it's just like, let's get something accomplished here, and then trying to forge a relationship that goes deeper somehow, finding some space in between those to-do items to go deeper on those relationships.
It's essential because we spend our time either in focused ways that we choose or ways that we have to.
Yeah.
So when you're an active parent and you're spending time around a whole bunch of other parents, that's an incredible opportunity to build as many bonds as you can. The same way when I speak in front of college or business courses, and I say to everyone to look around the room because the people around you that you build relationships with are the ones going to accelerate your career and have your back. Everyone else will be a distant memory. Everyone sort of shifts their thinking that this idea of networking through is not as important anymore, and building purposeful community with is essential. That's the nature of the book that I wrote with my co-author Noah Askin. Most of my work is try to convince people that it is okay to have it be strategic who you have around you, your top five, your core group, but it's also necessary to do the self work you need in order to insist upon the same level of rigor, of transparency, of ethics, of whatever you might be in any circle or community. And so in my network, to be in my private community, and this is why I was always interested, especially in going on a podcast like yours, the rule is you have to be somebody in my network that I or somebody else would leave my children with, or you cannot be nominated in.
Hmm. Hmm. So, what are there any? I mean, we're talking kind of a higher theoretical level. We're not talking about nuts and bolts, but are there things that you use personally that are stock questions or stock things that you do to try to 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 break through, or questions that you always have at the top of your mind, or gambits or whatever? I mean, you used to touch somebody on the elbow, which now you don't do at all, to just try to establish
Yep.
intimacy. But are there questions that you always know you're going to ask without kind of like running through the macro view, and then trying to figure it out in the moment how you could go deeper?
Well, you're talking to somebody who's a professional improviser, so I love thinking in the moment.
Okay.
But here's what I'd say. Anyone who comes to me with a boilerplate question, I can read in a second. You probably can too. They probably can if it's coming at them.
Right.
So unless it is real and immediate to you, then it's not going to be that way when you talk with somebody else.
Yeah.
And whether it's the start of, travel, I will leave like, so we'll just take this as a general subject. I fly a lot. I take a lot of planes. I travel a lot. I'm really tired of being in airports. Do you have much to follow up on as a podcast
Yeah,
interviewer when I
right.
say that?
Yeah,
You
right.
probably don't. But if I say, you know
Yeah.
what, I sat with my kids a few years ago and I said, listen, Eva and Max, Daddy has to travel. It's important for his work, for his community, for how he helps people. What's going to make you happy about the travel? And my kids started with keychains, but they kept falling off their backpacks until my kids said snow globes.
Oh, good.
So now I
Of
have
course.
84 of them. I have I didn't think I needed a display case in my life, but like I needed a display case. My kids love it because I'm only allowed to get a snow globe that's different than all the others. Paul, when you travel, what helps you remember that fondly? What did you collect?
Yeah. Yeah. Usually
And
just photos.
photos, yeah.
But snow globes are triggering for me because my TSA took away my snow globe my daughter had bought on a trip one time, and so then I hear that as a as a keepsake, I'm always like, oh my God,
I mean, we
what
we
did
had
that?
we had the one I wanted to get from my mom's great aunt, and it seemed like it was just the right size, and we took it to TSA and we proved it was the right size, and the guy said, "No, I think it's too big," and he threw it in the trash.
Oh,
And so, yeah, that sucked for me too.
yeah,
It's a snow globe. It's not a
right,
destructive
yeah,
device. But my point in that, and I'm sorry to have triggered you with
yeah.
losing the one from your daughter,
I'll be
but
the rest of the day is ruined now, David.
well, I'll try to figure out what it was. And then I'll find some way on eBay to find it for you. If your daughter listens to your podcast, then this will be an example of her going, "Yes, I'm going to call up David Homan and
Yeah,
help
right.
him replace the snow
The
globe
pain in my dad's heart for what happened.
and heal that for Paul."
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but now we're not talking about banal things about travel. Like
right,
even that as an
right.
example, it's personal because then in this case it brought me back to my kids. And the point isn't I collect snow globes. The point is I had to find something for my kids to feel joy with me being gone. How deep is that? Who can be superficial? Kids or not.
Right.
And so every example has to be relevant for you. In this case, I'm about to get on two different flights. I go back and forth to Chicago, then I take a train back and forth to DC. Then I have back and forth to Austin and Dallas. I'm in Savannah, Georgia for a little bit in between that. Like I'm gonna have four new snow globes. But that's not the point. But the point is, how am I navigating my kids missing me?
Yeah, yeah,
How are you doing that with yours?
yeah.
And anyone who comes with that humility and humaneness of being able to be courageous enough to share something that's not generic, just try to phrase it in a way that gives the person the ability to answer you back or offer something. And if not, that's okay.
Yeah,
Not everyone wants to talk to everyone else.
yeah.
Not everyone is in a position to share, but if you try enough, you will hit it out of the park with just enough relationships to make all of your time invested
Mhm.
as a parent, as a business leader, as a philanthropist worthwhile from it.
So I have another area that I wanted to explore with you because it's a theory, a pet theory of mine that I haven't really gotten any validation on by somebody who's got the experience you do. But I've always thought
Okay.
that,
So no pressure, right?
no
Now
pressure.
now
No,
I
it's
now I
not.
better be on top of my game. Go ahead.
Well, this is for non-networking events. But say you and I have this conversation, and I say maybe you could help me out. I'm trying to meet other people in the connection industry or public speaking or whatever. And you say, well, I've got three friends who could help you out. You can give me the names, and we connect later on. My theory has always been that though a lot of those conversations, yeah, they may, you may hit somebody at the right time. You may end up meeting somebody in that way that there is a spark or whatever. But I've always wondered whether those type of conversations should start more like, David, you know me now. You know a little bit about who I am. Do you know anybody in your network who would give me energy or would spark with me in the same way that you see in me and that would bring life rather than just another how-to conversation or another ego-driven I'm doing this and you're doing that kind of conversation. All the ones that we all have when we network in that way. Oh, Paul, I want you to meet so and so, and you get on the phone and they're like, why am I, why am I having this conversation? This person brings me no joy, brings me no inspiration. It falls flat. And there are so many other people out there who would be bringing that excitement and energy to a relationship.
So I am glad you asked that because this is my specific expertise.
Oh, wow.
It's the
Okay.
one
Well,
thing, it's the one thing that I love to pull out of people. Okay. So there's a couple different parts. I'll be pretty concise with it for everyone listening. So first off, you have to be clear when you're asking for something, what your purpose
yeah,
is.
yeah.
If you're
Not
saying
just
I'd like to connect with people to give me greater energy, somebody might interpret that differently. Maybe you want to meet energy healers. Maybe you want to meet electricians for the densest of us
cocaine
all.
dealers. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Oh,
yeah,
no.
exactly, right? So like you have to be clear not just on what would be your passion. That's the way I phrase it. And this is called the impact ask within my world. You have to then give people the greater vision, what's would amplify what that relationship could be.
Hmm.
So I'm Paul. I love doing these podcasts with active dads. I didn't start this because I believe that more dads should be in conversation, more vulnerable. I believe that kids overall are going to be much better in this modern world when fathers are as active in what they do. And my passion is not just to talk to those active dads, but to talk to active dads who figured out that struggle while being the CEO of a company, while being a founder, while losing their job and still needing to show up for both things at once. And the struggles of that can make us all feel we're not alone. Do you know anyone that might be a great podcast guest or might know somebody that'd be a great sponsor for my podcast who really gets that what I'm after isn't to prove I was a great dad and my daughter loves me despite losing a snow globe, but that there is more in this that has to be an active conversation. And did you have an active dad growing up, or are you now?
Yeah.
And the tone can change when you can phrase that from your passion to what's amplified to specificity. Because most people, even professional connectors, are dense and they don't know who they know. So
Yeah.
once you get through all that, right, then the steps are, and if you're the person asking, you say, would it be okay if I sent you 2 paragraphs on this for you to send to XYZ person that you mentioned?
Hmm.
That way, that person reads it, they opt in, there's been clarity on it. That double opt in means they will 90% of the time actually take the call, remember who you are, or at least read it as a synopsis 30
Hmm.
seconds before or during, depending
Right.
if it's a Zoom call or not. Um, but when you get that permission, then the person who made the intro has the ability to really understand that it was the right match, not just a well-intentioned one by who says yes and who says no. And the same thing, if you're the one being who's offering, be really nice, Paul, to help you. But if you really want my help, then could you give me a paragraph or two on your why and really how it's going to be amplified? Because if you're serious about me giving you this relationship value, and I'm giving the inner narrative no one ever talks about, then show me the trust and the courtesy of giving that ask to me and letting me pass it along.
Hmm.
And when you make introductions in this way, either as the receiver or the facilitator, what ends up happening is the ones that were supposed to happen. People filter out. In some cases, we learn who's not, but you're never at fault for asking and connecting to the wrong person or being introduced to them. If you follow a process that isn't, oh yeah, Paul, you should meet my friend
Right,
Greg,
right.
ex
He's a
Greg,
dad. You're a
Greg,
dad.
Greg, be on Paul's podcast. We don't want that.
Right.
The time has to be valued. The time is the penultimate value. It's not our money. We put our money into what time we have left and therefore what relationships we build from it.
Right.
And so that's a sacred thing, actually. That's why I think about us needing to be ready to ask, to be respectful of how we handle it, and to be specific and learn if we're not being specific enough. We need to hone it. And in some cases, it's just not the right person we're asking.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But the power of an introduction, I ask everyone to think about the 5 times in their life that an intro changed it. And then to think about any times in their life that didn't happen from an intro to an event, to a party, first job. And it's all that intro. And that for me is what is sacred about this world, what I call orchestrating connection. And there's no difference in my world between the business approach, the philanthropy approach, the hey, my kid's going to Little League with you. Can they grab, a ride? versus, my kids having struggles at school. You know, could you talk to me about how you manage this with your son who's older?
Yeah.
And all that is this idea that if you're curious about others and courageous enough to be vulnerable, then the actions people take filter out those that will be positive in your life and those that will be not just negative, but wasteful.
Yeah. So how do we use some of these skills with our own kids? Is it fundamentally the same thing, or is there some difference between how we interact with our own children in this way? Obviously, you're not meeting your kids for the first time when you go to dinner, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know that adage, right? It'd be easier for me to do this with your kids than mine,
yeah, right.
right? With children, what I had to learn was you have to teach them things that they won't understand until years after you taught them.
That's a good point.
The number of time that you can say to kids, like, the world doesn't revolve around you, yet everyone grows up thinking the world does.
Yeah,
Those that become great people learn. There's a lot of people with worse problems than you have.
yeah,
Those that end up being horrible people think, well, this happened to me. What happened to me? And so the only skills that I have with my kids that are really applicable are they know when I'm struggling. They know what I do. They know what drives me to do it. But I am abundantly clear about the consequences of actions. My daughter was homesick yesterday and I was busy, but I took some time off. And she said to me, because I've been able to convey this to her as a parent, I was like, listen, like, of course, that because I canceled these 3 calls, I'm going to have to carve out time next week that I was planning on being with you guys. I,
right.
I don't have the
You need it
option
now.
of it.
Right, right.
And she really, I mean, she was in a anxious, not ideal state, but she even in that state said to me, I understand. I needed the time now,
Yeah.
right? To get a kid to understand the value exchange, if you can't just have it all every moment, um, that's an important one. My daughter's more verbose with what she says. My son is the type that you ask him how his day was in 15 different ways, and he goes good and gives you a thumbs up. So I have to keep phrasing it as to, well, when I was in third grade, this is what happened to me when granddad told everyone the party started later. And then he'll open up because I'm actually sharing something that happened to me. And you might not think to say to an 8-year-old, like, here's something that happened to me that haunts me to this day. But I phrased it in a way that made him say to me this beautiful thing. He's like, well, that's why you like to hold parties now. And so all we can apply are those first things of being, courageously vulnerable and curious in the right way. And the other part that is, my last principle in the book is this idea of not just asking them to be gracious and to express gratitude, but to demonstrate it constantly of what you're proud of for them, what you're proud of with other kids. I said to my daughter, like, I'm so grateful for her friend's mom, taking the kids for a few hours on Rosh Hashanah. I'm glad you got to bond with those kids. I just want you to know, Eva, I sent her this beautiful note
Yeah.
of gratitude, an adult act. You want a kid to be gracious. We somehow say, be thankful, but we don't demonstrate that we're doing it.
Right. Right.
And the more we demonstrate that the difference is just that they're younger, not that the actions should be different. Kids should be just as vulnerable, just as curious as adults should be. Kids should be just as gracious. They should act to help people to do things that don't affect themselves.
Yeah.
No one can be no one can be perfect with it.
Right.
Same way that I say to my daughter always, like, you need to keep when you go to an event, talk to people who do not look like you or talk like you, because the more diversity your network has, the more you'll find people like you, not just who look like you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm supposed to say that as a parent in this day and age, but I do. And my daughter ends up with kids who are just amazing kids, but they don't
Well,
fit the stereotype of who she should be around.
I'm curious why you wouldn't think that that would be something. I mean, sounds like that's what we all want for our kids. I mean, obviously, a lot of people don't believe in diversity, but I want my kids to gain from the experience of all types of other people. I would never want them to be closed in and just look for the most popular person in the room or the one that looks exactly like them. Why would you think it's not something you would say?
So I think we're in a world where what was tribal
Yeah.
and was what was survivalistic, we on all appearances, seem to think or we're told to think we need to go back to.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's a
And I think that is the fracturing of our society as a whole.
yeah,
It is that. And so do you or I think that and agree and tell our kids and all their friends to do it? Sure. But
right.
other people are in this mindset where they really still think that the way they're going to get ahead at life or be safe is going to surround themselves with people who are mirror images of them.
Yeah.
Not only is that incredibly boring for the most part,
Right. Right.
um, but it's not strategic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it works both ways too. If I see myself as a victim, as I'm the only one of three people who in a big crowd, and I'm the only people who are like that, and then I don't go and talk to the other people. I've now isolated myself from the whole community, self-isolated, self-discriminated, and now I've lost that opportunity to have a broader perspective. And you don't have to be far right on the spectrum to understand why that tribalism doesn't broaden your options and your experience.
It's true, but it's not left or right, or that the far right in this country of the United States to be particular. Like it's the same on the far left.
Yeah,
When you go to any extreme, you ignore the norm.
yeah,
And when you walk into a room in a social context where there are half women, half men, and you only go to talk to the men, continuing that
exactly.
stereotype.
Yeah,
When you walk into a room and you see three women of color and two white men, and I'm a white man and I walk to the men, continue that stereotype. When you buck the trends of what tribalism over centuries has taught us, and you go, I'm going to go talk with them and just be a person,
right.
it is always richer, always better. And in my world, right, I come from no connections to having relationships and connections with many of the most notable celebrities and athletes and billionaires on this planet. And I built an entire global world of access and trust by talking to the person that didn't look like the one that I should have engaged with,
Yeah,
by befriending them and then having a WNBA star be my parent buddy, by walking to a room talking about my own mental health challenges and my issues with my kids waking up early, and befriending a couple who then led me to work with one of the most notable billionaires on the planet. So this isn't left or right. It's not political. It's not business hat versus parent hat. Like your time is your time. You're your one person. And when we don't lean in particular to the values we have as a parent, then we end up meeting people who go against those values later, because they're, in my world, are the dads who show up and everyone else. And if you're one of those dads who doesn't show up for your kids, I'm going to try to help you. But if you don't want help, you don't get to be in my world.
hmm
I would not leave my kids with somebody who doesn't show up for pickup once, who doesn't go see the school play,
right.
who when the kid's sick, the nurse never calls you. It's only the mom.
Yeah,
And I made that rule 10 years ago because I had an active dad and I didn't realize how lucky I was until years later when everyone says to me, I'm trying to escape the shadow of how my parents raised me. And I'm thinking, I mean, I'm a nervous traveler because of my father. But besides that, I got, the lottery in terms of having parents where the way they taught me, I now teach my kids and I don't have to fight against those tendencies every single
Mhm.
day.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Greg, this has been a really interesting conversation, especially. I mean, we've only touched on a little bit on the kid part, but I think that a lot of these lessons are really important. The one thing that you said that isn't necessarily uh, directly related to the connection was the fact that you teach your kids lessons years before they can act on them, and how important that is ongoing. Add that to the many lists of things that we do actively, or we try to do actively as fathers every day. This is Being a parent is not an easy thing, and I do this podcast mostly because I want to inspire dads to think about this more actively. If you're just, 1/10 more involved, more connected parent today than you were yesterday, I feel like I've done my little drop in the ocean. But this has really been very good. I've learned a lot, both about networking professionally as well as better relationships with my kids. So thanks a lot, David.
Paul, I'm so grateful both for you having me on, but more importantly, your mission and why you bring everyone into this conversation. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's very sweet of you to say. So, David, people can find you at orchestratingconnection.com. We didn't talk about the super connection archetype test you're launching later on in the year. We didn't talk much about your book, but I'm sure people can go there. And if there's, we'll put those links in the show notes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I make myself easy to find. You can listen to my classical music, read my book, take the connector test, watch my videos. I now have social media. 4 months ago was just my mom as my Instagram follower. I've tried to put these lessons out there because they've been useful to some of the most connected people on the planet. And I truly believe if we have more purposeful community around us in every walk of our life,
Yeah.
we have a better world from it because our reputation means we have to always act better than the time we acted before.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's how nothing slipped through the cracks as a parent. You don't
Yeah.
know what's happening behind closed door to some other beautiful child
Yeah.
or to some parent who's struggling and doesn't have the ability to ask for help.
Yeah. That's so important. Yeah. All right. Paul Banis with GreatDad.com. You can find my coaching offerings at GreatDad.com/go, as well as an 8 week long course that you get it free as a podcast listener on gratitude, because I too believe that's one of the key things that we can all do to not only be happy ourselves, but to spread that kind of appreciation, that joy around the world. And it has a real strangely karmic effect. And I'm not at all spiritual, but I'm a big believer on how gratitude works, just day by day, interaction by interaction. And I loved what you were saying about expressing gratitude in front of your kids about other people's acts, and rather just saying, "Oh, Judy did a nice thing today," but like, "I'm so grateful for that. I'm so appreciative of that." There's something magic in those words for whatever human reason.
Well, thank you, Paul.
Okay. Thank you very much. See you next time. Everybody, stay strong. A strong family starts with you.